things like it's social events that you can just meet people and also know a little bit of basic knowledge of other programs.
Okay. So generally, it's more positive feedback for the idea. Can you say that? Yeah, okay, I don't see.
I think it's a tough one to get negative feedback.
Okay, but we got this sound situation sorted out, but we lost the front camera, so sadly it's either the one or the other. Yeah, we have to say that like my computer just died again. Like it died half a year ago, and that's what I used last time for this setup, so yeah.
Well, but who needs faces if we can have presentations?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's jump into presentation.
Anonymous Josef. Nobody knows how you look. Yes. In the internet, nobody knows that you look.
Yeah, hello myself as well. Great to see you all here in person, and hello to the online community. I'm Josef Pelz, and today I will talk again about my constraint simulation tool, which is initially was meant to simulate fabrics and cloth, but I kind of went on and made a more general thing out of it. This is something I published to the community, and I will explain how to use it briefly, and maybe depending on how interesting this is for you, also how I build it. And then I will also show some more recent things I've worked on. So some of you might have seen this before. What I created is this tool that does real-time simulation of fabrics, and it just gets some kind of soft geometry as an input. You can then load this input into it and simulate it according to a parameter interface. And I have a number of different settings here. For instance, I could maybe have a force that also pulls the geometry back to its initial position, and it will try to reassemble itself, and these kind of things. Some of you might have played with this before. I'm very grateful if people use it and post stuff from it, because it's very inspiring to me as well to see what people do with the tool. And there's also already a question you might think about. I would be curious to hear what you would like to see as features for this. So maybe while you're looking at this, come up with ideas to ask later. So we have basic parameters like gravity that would just kind of define a force that pulls the fabric or tissue downwards, or maybe, I don't know, might as well be sidewards. And I have step size, so how fast it's supposed to be, and then a very crucial parameter is like the stiffness. So it can either behave it becomes at some point a kind of fluid that just flies around without much influence, or it can be very stiff. It will now break. Let me see, why does it move? Yeah, no, it's a little bit stiffer, so it behaves more like a aluminum foil maybe. I think that's kind of how it started. So I had a 2D grid as an input and simulated that. And then at some point I decided it's supposed to break. So you can now define different areas through attributes that break easier than others, or generally define a stress resistance parameter that tells the simulation how easy stuff is supposed to break. And then, oops, whee! Hello. Yeah, and then I decided that it's interesting to have 3D geometry, because that's the next thing I should talk about, the basic component of this whole simulation, and that is just something that's called the spring constraint. So what it is basically just a line with two endpoints, and when you load the geometry in, those points have a certain distance to each other, and the simulation tries to maintain this distance. So if there's any force that, for example, gravity, that pushes them apart, they will have a counter force that tries to pull them together again, and vice versa. It behaves like a metal spring, you would know. So the very most basic setup is to have just one line, 2 points, and I, for example, could alter the rest length of the spring. So if I decrease this parameter, they will go closer together. If I increase it, it will just push apart. And you can already do some fun stuff with that and define the stiffness. So if I do this very stiff, let's see if this also breaks, it will now be, quicker in its response, and also define air resistance because it should get to rest state after a while. So that's the very basic setup. And then if we do some more complex stuff, we can combine a bunch of these lines and maybe pin some points to the animation. So you have 2 endpoints. There's a custom attribute on the points. I don't know if who's familiar with attributes on subgeometry. So I just, in this case, used a group node to kind of get the 2 endpoints and set that as a group, and then defined a custom attribute that's called mass. And that's generally 1 for all points, so they are affected by gravity except for those 2 points on the end, so they are pinned to the animation kind of. And now we can do more interesting stuff with it. So we can alter the stiffness and get some very rigid lines. I will go through this a little bit quicker because I think there are more interesting things to look at. But yeah, at that point you can get creative and think, okay, what happens if I don't have a line but a grid? I kind of showed this to you already, but yeah, we have wind force and stuff, and a lot of things to play around with. And then we have 3D geometry and the possibility to break things. And I think this is where it really gets interesting, especially if you don't use a grid, but maybe a 3D geometry. They can, like, again, I fixed some points, I pinned some points to the animation. And then, of course, all those parameters could react to music or whatever kind of input you prefer, and can roll back together. And this is just really fun to play with. Yeah. And then maybe something, because something I want to talk about are custom attributes, because I also made it possible to define varying stiffness and stress resistance among the geometry, which is the reason why it didn't break here but at the rest of the geometry. And for that I use Houdini, another software most of you might know. And here I just drew some areas which are stiffer, beautiful painting, and export this as a H classic. I kind of need to use this data format because it keeps the attributes, so it allows me to port the attributes. Let me see, so I will reload the file, and now it should break at different points. It doesn't really break, so I decrease the stress resistance, maybe increase the stiffness, and then at some point it does break. This is too.
May I ask if you tried this? Because I tried something similar from Blender and I didn't get any.
That's a good question. I mostly work with Houdini if I don't work with TouchDesigner, so I don't know Blender very well. If there's a way for you to export from Blender to TouchDesigner such that you get the primitive attributes, then it will definitely work. So what you need to do is to find a way to have a attribute here that in this case needs to be primitive attribute that's called stress resistance. Maybe someone else knows, but Yeah, so this tool is, yeah, I developed that over the pace of, I don't know, 9 months because I was very much into it. Today I went on because I thought, I got inspired by a video online and thought it would be cool to have, for example, like exploding stuff. So, I wanted to have a like point and an area that you would do like an explosive force and try to implement that. So, does it work? No, I added some kind of advanced. I added another tab that's called advanced, and it allows me to do, for example, this, or have a custom gravity field. So it doesn't just have a linear gravity in one direction, but maybe a twisted gravity, and that's then all based on GLSL.
Are you doing this like actions from Houdini too, or everything is like?
That's TouchDesigner, and in this case I have a small GLSL, so just a det. This one is small, come on, it's really small. And so I just define a function called gravity field that is used in the other code. But that's, yeah, it's advanced. It's not supposed to be used by anybody. This is the actual patch that's doing the stuff. In the beginning we have a lot of Python code that is organizing the transition from sub data to top data, so I can work with GLSL afterwards, and then the core of everything is this compute shader that has all the code in here and runs in a feedback loop. And then there are also 3 different ways to render the output. In order to demonstrate that, let's use a grid again. The input always needs to be polygonal, so if you input a mesh, the tool won't work. So if you play with it, be aware that this needs to be a mesh. Polygon, thanks. And so we do have some stuff going on. So
Do you have the light here?
yeah, I have a light, and it renders shadows for me. I think it's really crucial to have shadows, because otherwise if I turn those off, it really looks just flat and one-dimensional. So I render shadows, which is honestly the most expensive part of the whole simulation at the moment, is to render the shadows, because of the thin lines, they need to have very high quality, the shadows. So I render this in 4K, even though the final result is only 1K. There's light, and then you can decide if you want to render just points from the simulation. So now I just render single points. Or if you want to render the wireframe we just saw until now, and you have the common like physical-based rendering attributes in here. And then you could also render a surface, and that is only if the input has triangles. So it will only render the triangles of the input. And yeah, no, only if you could totally do that, but then you would, so because if I put the interior connections in there, it will not have a surface. As soon as it has a surface, and then it needs to have a triangular surface. So I think if I would, there should be something like subdivide, thanks, yeah. That should allow me to do, yeah, no, it does only Catmull Clark, it doesn't do loop set. But if you would have any geometry that has a outside triangular mesh, it would render that. And it also takes into account UV attributes, so you could have maybe a color map that would be used to, yeah, okay, this is the worst example, but you could map whatever kind of texture on it and do, I don't know, a very, ugly thing. Okay, so this is basically the tool. I kind of rushed through this because I also presented this several times before. I hope some of you haven't seen this before, and I would love to see you play with it and maybe give me any feedback on it, what you would like to see, because I'm grateful to share this with the community and see people using it. And there were some people who even went into the code and did stuff I wasn't expecting, so that's cool. Maybe some projects. I was very proud to see the two of the Red Hot Chili Peppers that was done by stage design, was done by a setup design agency from they did the stage design and they licensed the tool to do visuals there. I think they used it maybe in only one show of all the shows, which is a pity. I would have loved to see it more, but that was cool to see that I don't even have a single picture where they use it. I need to get that, but this is the only picture. So you don't see the Red Hot Chili Peppers in front of it. And then I used it for, let's see if I can find that quickly. I used that for an installation at the Artec house for the Society for Neuroscience. That was a public educational project, and that was really fun to work with, and a kind of perfect commission for the tool, because I was supposed to visualize the decay and the death of a human brain cell, a neuron. So I used my tool to and plugged in a 3D, very unique 3D model of the human brain, and shriveled it down over time so it would decay, and this video takes some time. And then I think like later on it rips apart and does these kind of things. That was a very interesting project to apply my tool to. This is this, and that's also what I told Stefan that I would present today. I would like to also talk about what I lately worked on. For a new project, I went into volumetric ray marching again. We get some errors here, that's always good. Why? Okay. Let's open that in the old TouchDesigner version. So volumetric ray marching is I don't know if it's necessarily the correct term for what it is, but it's for me a way to render like cloud-like geometry. And the shape of the object I'm rendering is stored in a 3D texture. So I have a lot of slices, a lot of images kind of that define in 3D a density field that I then render using two compute shaders. The first one here is responsible to calculate shadows, and the second one is responsible to create the actual 2D image out of it. And then I can define like my light position and maybe light color and these kind of things. And that's like, I'm working for a project with this. It's very interesting. I will probably publish this soon for the community also, because this is something that's missing, I feel like, in TouchDesigner, to have a convenient way to render 3D volumetric information. And I think what's fun to do with this is to have a video. Let's look at this video of mine, which is just some video, actually debugging video from another project. And then with a 3D, texture 3D top, you can store all those images slice after slice in a 3D texture. This is going to freeze my laptop in a second. So I have all the images of the short video in one 3D texture. And then I can just plug this into my system, and let's look at the result. And we get, let's do this white again. And we get kind of a 3D representation of that video, which is kind of interesting. So I will put this side by side. You can see how the yeah, I think it's clear, the Z component of the geometry is kind of the, yes, the time in the video. And yeah, they're very interesting. That's just an interesting way to create shapes for me.
Basically like a flip book, right?
It's, yeah, it's like a flipbook. I think you could also say that this is not supposed to be pre-filled, but just make it active. So now it kind of loads picture by picture in there. You would probably do, yeah. I mean, loading a video is one thing. We can do whatever animated. Yeah, we could also just plug a camera signal in there. I won't do that now. But yeah.
You know, with this project, you have a scanner of the human body visualizes.
Mm-hmm.
That would be pretty cool to put that in there.
Yeah. Do you have the footage? Give it to me. So yeah, I'm still debugging the system kind of, because I don't know, if the density is very high, it looks it looks very rough, and if I lower it looks much better if it's not so dense. So I'm still trying to get the right, to optimize the code. I found some interesting, if there's anybody who's deeply into GLSL and worked on similar stuff before, it would be very interesting to talk about this, because I came up with an idea to optimize the shadow calculation, but I think it's not perfect yet. Yeah, I don't know how I'm in with time and stuff, because I feel like
yeah,
I rushed
like
through it.
5 minutes, but because like Stefan, because we had to
Yeah.
resolve the audio issues, so
I'm happy to take questions and have a
Yeah.
little discussion at this moment, because I also just had a monologue and I love to get some feedback on this. So yeah, any ideas what you would like to use this tool for, or what you would like to have as a possibility in that? Yeah.
So I have, is there any possibility to have, for example, that instead of doing attributes from Houdini, you can really do it from textures inside TouchDesigner for the constraint tool, so that way you can interactively read things apart or stuff like this?
Yeah, good point. I kind of forgot to show that. I wanted to. I did that. It was a client work, so I need to make sure that this is not hurting any IPs. But I did a version of it where there are, there's sound. That sound is bad. Yeah, where all the most of the attributes can be defined through a map, through a UV map. And there's some exhibition that's supposed to start, I think, in November somewhere in Brooklyn, where you use the Kinect connected to the system, and you just have a wobbly texture going around, and if you pass by, it will you will act as a force on it, and it will rip apart and follow you for some time. This is the best footage I captured so far.
Basically starting from the image through the UV map. That's the way that you
Yeah, so right now I use the Kinect camera and only get the player index, so only the outline of the people, and then use optical flow to get the movement direction, and use that as a 2D force and push the stuff in a direction.
What would you say the biggest bottleneck in the system?
Shadow calculation. It's like I was really surprised when I finished this off how performative it is, because right now I have like 200 by 200 Okay, I will freeze my computer for some time and see if it breaks. But I go for 1,000 by 1,000 point geometry, and at that moment take Biliam's question until my
On your Instagram, you're also working with polymetric lighting, right?
yeah.
Is there any way to maybe include that in some kind of normal render network? So,
In a what?
in like a usual render network, so as like usual hosts that also have
Mhm.
shaders, it would absolutely enough to have the documentary.
Yeah, I already found a way to have solid geometry inside of the volumetric geometry. That's something I worked on, and I think that's very interesting. And it's relatively easy to place the geometry in there and have the depth map correct. But then again, the shadows is kind of hard. It's easy to bring the shadows from the volumetric object on the surface of the solid object, but it's tough to also render have it like imagine solid ball here, volumetrics all around, here's a light, and then the ball is obviously supposed to have a shadow, and there should be no light. And this part of the calculation is not so easy the way I did it for now. But yeah, that's something that at least without shadows should be done.
Figure it out.
Yeah. Thanks.
We have 2 questions from the chat.
Oh,
Yeah, a question.
Um,
Is it possible
Oh,
to
okay.
is it possible to add some follow animation stuff, like to follow the base, the initial shape of geometry? Is it possible in this system?
there's a pullback force that forces the points back to the initial position. Is that what you mean?
But is it possible to animate the basic shape
Ah,
to displace it maybe and
Mhm.
and have
Yeah,
on top of it the layer of animation,
I see.
adding details
Mhm.
and
I see a question, and that kind of also goes back to your question, Vincent, because apart from calculating the shadows, the biggest bottleneck is kind of loading in the geometry, so the Python part of the thing. I thought about doing this in CUDA, but then you should probably do the whole thing in CUDA, but Python is just really not optimized for this. What I wrote is really not optimized for this. So yeah, as you saw, my computer just froze for 20 seconds to load in the geometry, but now that it is loaded in, this laptop with, I don't know, let's go for 10 substeps. Okay, then it breaks. Let's go for 20. It still renders it at 18 frames per second. If I turn off the shadows, we're at 23. Okay, not so significant at the moment. Yeah. Okay, it's my laptop. I shouldn't have gone for 1 million points, but you see it's relatively optimized, but it still freezes for 20 seconds. So if you would animate the input geometry, there's not really a chance to get close to real
maybe
time.
is it possible to animate it after the loading?
Yeah,
Doing some calculations after that.
I mean, yeah. If that's generally interesting, there would be a way. I mean, you can use the sop to chop and then chop to top to get the information of the geometry into tops. And since I would only need the point positions, and that should be relatively performative, and I could read the new positions from there. So that's doable, yeah.
Are hard shadows viable at all?
Hmm?
Are hard shadows viable at all?
Yeah, because you saw that I use soft shadows. From my experience, they look way worse. But that's also really due to the fact that we are really rendering millions and millions of lines,
Yeah.
and each one, you need to get thin detail. I mean, that's something I spend a lot of time really observing these shadows and what they do, because from my point of view, they behave weirdly. Because along one line you see that the shadow is not consistent, and that's because it interpolates the shadow map and doesn't do nearest pixel, which would be bad as well, but due to the interpolation you get these things. It doesn't really look good. I think it looks much better if you don't render a wireframe but the surface. Let's see. let's get rid of our ugly texture here and make it like this. So this looks decent, maybe. Where's my light? Yeah, the shadows looks better if you do. Yeah, here the shadows look okay, I would say.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So what about kind of collision or like interacting with another thing?
It's tough to collect with how do you say? Sorry, collide with normal geometry that's defined by a mesh or anything. That's very expensive unless you do some optimization I didn't think about yet. I had a version that would collide with SDFs, with signed distance functions. That's also a nerdy thing, and it would also require you to write GLSL snippets. But so you could define a surface with code, and it's relatively easy to collide with that. And then also for this client, do I find that now? I doubt it. I made a version where I could collide with a 3D texture, as you saw on the other one, that defines an object. So you have a 3D texture that's mostly 0, and then at some points you have solid geometry that's defined by 1, and then it would be easier to collide with that. I did that, or actually, yeah, whatever. But I did that, and then I also built a Houdini to TouchDesigner bridge because it's way more convenient to. Because at that point you can use whatever geometry, create, do that to assign distance fields, 3D texture in Houdini, and then import that to TouchDesigner. This works, and it works relatively well.
I'm afraid we are out of time now.
But there were questions from the. Let's take one question.
Yeah,
from
okay. So basically, one question is a quick one. Are these plans part of this or innocent bystanders? I think it was about the video where.
What?
Are those plans part of this or innocent bystanders? It was about the video that you showed. So it's already a little bit late for
That was okay. That was just random test footage from a master series thesis.
And the other one is Paqueta 12 is asking, can you tell us a little?
Greetings.
Greetings. Can you tell us a little bit more about reconnecting the points? How do you rematch the indices?
Yeah, that's kind of a good question. They only reconnect to the points they were initially connected to, so they don't loop over all the points and how close they would be to them. I only reconnect to the points they were initially connected to. And the texture I'm working on looks like this, and the first part of it holds the position, the second part holds the velocity, and the third part holds the information about which points are connected with which other points. It's a whole mess with indices, and if an indice broke, if a connection broke, it's still stored in there but with a negative sign, so I can later reconstruct it. Yeah.
Okay.
If that helps.
So yeah, thank you a lot, Stefan.
Thank you all.
And we will be back in
No spoilers.
10 minutes.
That's what I was saying, 10 minutes.
Sorry, I wasn't aware.
Okay, we're about ready for the next presentation. Are you excited? So the next presentation is coming from Vincent Naples, and other than I said, he's not from Los Angeles. He's actually an original Chicago boy. I don't know why I always mix that up. Vincent has been visiting the Node Institute several times. Even though he lives in the States, he's kind of a regular here. So we're happy that he's back. And he's going to talk about Hive, which is a pretty crazy system. He explained it recently to me, and I was quite mind blown by the possibilities, but also I wouldn't know how to operate it because it's so manifold. So I'm very happy that he's going to explain it to us now a bit more and closer. I think there's many takeaways for our own systems, but also he's going to he promised that he's going to publish parts of it soon. So I think that's a very exciting prospect. And without further ado, and maybe for the people in the stream, the reason why you don't see any faces is, even so we have the most handsome presenters today, is because we have bandwidth problems and we have to choose between audio and video. And of course, we choose video for the presentations, but audio for the sound. Okay, anyway.
Oh, hi. I'm Vincent. Super grateful to Stefan and the Node Institute, and to be counted amongst the many brilliant presenters here. Whenever I see Josef's work, my mind explodes a little bit, and yeah, super grateful to be here. I am here to talk about Hive, and Hive is a system of tools that I've been building now for several years, since before the pandemic. But during the pandemic, I found myself with a whole lot more time on my hands to take little things that I'd been experimenting with and really try to flesh them out into reusable and recyclable and modular global components. A lot of what I'm building is based on trying to find easier ways to do things in TouchDesigner. So there's a lot of really fantastic systems that people have built. Balaam is here. His system is super incredible. Algorithm, super inspiring. Great VJ tool. My tool does some of these things, but it's really meant to be a way to help work inside of TouchDesigner and work with the UI of TouchDesigner. So before I get going, I'm going to try to speed run this because I've given this presentation to a few friends and collaborators now, and my best time is about 40 minutes, so I'm going to try to beat that record tonight. So let us get started. This is Hive, and the basic overlay is a UI, which looks something like this. And we have a scene changer, which is based on Jarrett from Derivative's scene changer component. This one is starting with this scene changer and a bit souped up with some callbacks and some extra features and methods. There's a post effects pipeline, there's an output modulo, and a scene library where all of the individual scenes live. But then there's the components library, and this is kind of the heart of Hive. It is a bunch of different individual components that can work theoretically inside of anyone's project. It's way too big of a beast for me to imagine that lots of other people would want to use all of this. And part of what's kept me from releasing a lot of it is the fact that there's so very, very much documentation that would need to happen for anyone to make any sense out of it. So what I've decided to do is start releasing it in chunks, starting with the very basics of this. And tonight, I'm really happy to announce a Patreon account where I will be releasing the first little component of this. That'll be an early look at some of this, but hopefully eventually all of this will become freely available to anyone who wants to use it. I just need to kind of work out my dependencies and make sure that these tools that all play nicely together play nicely individually, so that any part of it that you might find useful, you'll be able to use in your own projects. So let us get started. One of the first things that I realized I needed was a macros system for quickly and easily getting at all of my other components. You probably see people constantly in tutorials, popping in here and getting like a keyboard indat, or a top rather, and using this in order to, reset your feedbacks, and, getting at some little thing here. I needed something a little bit more robust than this. So we'll go into the keys section. This is the keys macro component, and I'm going to be sharing this one quite soon on this Patreon. The idea behind this component is that you have every key available to you as a parameter, but beyond this we have a table. I like working with tables. I like working with DATs. The problem is that working with DATs is kind of a drag in TouchDesigner. If I open this up, it opens up really small. If I want to get to the very end of it, oh shit, I can't do that. I have to keep doing this in order to see the end of it. It doesn't scale very well. It's a little bit of a bummer. So the first thing that I really needed to do was create a solution for this. And this is where my Lister UI kind of works. If anyone's used Lister before, it's a really great tool by Ivan. And this is kind of a wrapper for it that allows me to work with any DAT in TouchDesigner and access that. So it's sortable, it is editable, I can drag and drop my shit, and everything is breaking on me because the demo gods are not smiling on me today. Alright, here we go. So Control-Alt-H opens up my keyboard shortcut macro editor. And here we have the ability to drag and drop and move things around. We have the ability to sort and rename columns. We have the ability to move our column width and height. And basically just a user interface that I'm using kind of all over the place. My scene changer is a lister, my post effects loop is a lister, and my preset manager is all sorted with a series of listers. Now, listers are not super performant. This is not a great tool for real-time editing these things, but no UI seems to be in TouchDesigner super performant. This is one of the really hectic issues of trying to build UIs. You make some really slick knobs and buttons and faders, and then you realize that you're eating up half of your performance with the UI you're trying to render, and that's killing everything else that you're trying to do. So a lot of this system is meant to actually ultimately be run really headless and to turn off parts of it that you don't need to be running. But we will get to that shortly. So the keyboard editor lets me do some really nifty things, right? I can set up a macro to quickly clear my text port, for instance, or I've assigned F5 to pop up my perform window just as a floating window. Normally I'm working with two screens, so this will be a little bit tricky because I like to have this screen on a second monitor and have access to that all the time. I'm going to be kind of hopping back and forth in order to show you a lot of this today. Let's see, I'm going to try to move as quickly as possible because there's a lot to get through, and I'm a little bit nervous because I haven't shown this to a lot of people at once yet. Let me check my notes. So the key macros, if you want to make macros, one of the other problems is that derivative has a lot of macros mapped all over the place, and you're going to run into some conflicts. So let's pop this open and let's try to make a new macro. So let's say I want to add a new row here. We'll append a row, and let's just make a debug statement and have caps lock on. So if I wanted to make this thing, we'll enable it. I already did this in the last demo. We'll delete this. All right, let's say I wanted to map this to F1. Well, we already know that F1 is being used by perform mode. So if I go to do this, it's going to tell me, oh, F1 is in use already. What do you want to do about it? And I'm going to have the option to either keep this in place or to override derivatives mapping. And this is really great because sometimes you don't want some of the hotkeys that derivative has given you and forced you to use. You might want to remap them to something else. So what's actually happening under the hood, if I hit Control-Alt-G, I get at the global shortcuts. And the global shortcuts table is the list of all of the things that derivative has given you already. And if I decided to say override, let's do that. Let's actually override perform mode. I'm going to override this, and now when I go to my global shortcuts table and look for F1, we're going to see it right over here. So what we've actually done is gotten rid of this. If I hit F1 now, did that do the trick? Maybe not. We've got our debug statement. What's happening is we're actually moving this to the offline column. And where this is stored, there's all kinds of secret hidden folders in TouchDesigner with like ugly T-script stuff from a million years ago that you're not supposed to see or know about. And this lives in the sys/local system. So yeah, these are the dark depths of TouchDesigner. And there is a system in place for having your own shortcuts. And the way derivative wants you to do this is to use your own table that lives here in your app preferences folder. What I'm actually doing is on start loading a script that freezes this table that lives here. This is derivatives shortcuts. And then when I make an update to my table, it pushes it to this table. And this allows you to offline things that you don't want to use anymore and define your own shortcuts, but it doesn't do it destructively. If you start doing this over here, when I originally built this, I was just overriding the user shortcuts table, and that meant anytime anybody ever loaded one of my projects on their machine, they're going to get all my shortcuts, and it's going to break all of derivatives shortcuts, and I didn't want this to be destructive. So this is kind of my workaround here. But this macros system lets me do a lot of things. It lets me have hotkeys for things that I really need. I saw that Josef and also Wayland are using this really spiffy MX3 mouse. It's a really great mouse that lets me assign keyboard macros to this thing. So like now I can have forward and backwards buttons right on my mouse in order to navigate my network really quickly. I can do stuff like let's just grab something here, sign a null straight from my mouse. I can dive into a pop-up network. I can grab a floating preview. I can customize my parent component. All of this stuff straight from my mouse.
How many keys do you have? You have the same mouse.
Yeah, so the gesture button on this mouse allows you 5 different gestures that you can do. And so assigning different keyboard shortcuts to those and using my keyboard system, it's just really super nice for moving around in TouchDesigner. So where did my notes go? Oh, they've been shut down. So while that's loading up, here's my website. I'm not here to talk about myself a whole lot, but you can go there and check it out. It is drmbt.com. This is my completely empty Patreon page that I just started this morning, and there's an Instagram of the same name, DRMBT. It is standing for Dreambait. A lot of people are confused by this, which is part of the fun for me. Is it Drumbeat? Is it Dreamboat? Is it Dr. Mibbit? Dreambait is my brand and artist identity. I do a lot of work as a VJ, as a projection mapper, pixel mapper, freelance creative technologist. I'm not going to say this thing of my work lives at the intersection of art and technology, but that wouldn't be inaccurate. Okay, so back to this. Par pop-up is next. So one of the things that I wanted was just a quick way to have parameters with a viewer and a couple of custom options that I can access through other parts of my system. I can use my key macros again to do this thing that every other app on the planet has of control and a comma in order to pull up some global shortcuts. And that is this thing right here, my settings component. This is where the most important parts of my system are bound to a single place so that I can access them whenever I need them. If I'm in my interface, I have this little gear button that will do the same thing. Most of the system has 2 or 3 or 5 different ways in order to do the same thing. So there's a lot to learn, maybe a bit of a learning curve, maybe a little bit confusing, but hopefully a lot of it is quite intuitive. We're going to get to the fun stuff, I promise, but I'm trying to build this up in such a way whereas you can see what some of the most crucial pieces of the puzzle do. Inspector gadget. So if anyone's been using TouchDesigner long enough, back in the day, panels were referred to as gadgets. And in TScript, they are still referred to as gadgets. And one of the things that I really wanted was a persistent way to contextually create shortcuts and things based on what is going on in my project. This is where Inspector Gadget comes into play. You can bypass it and turn it off. I don't know how heavy it is because sometimes, you know, it's always cooking, but it's really a place where I can figure out what node I'm selecting, what panel I'm rolling over, if I'm hovering over a par, if I'm hovering over something else. And this lets me do a lot of really fun things. One of them is contextual hotkeys for rollover pars. And we'll get to that in just a second. Let's create a scene because I can demonstrate some of this quite quickly if I do that. So we'll just call this test and we'll make a new scene. And what this does is it creates a scene from my template. If we open it up, it's pretty empty here. I hate this thing of how the op create menu is always under my floating menus. I've asked about fixing this and it can't be done, unfortunately. All right, so we have this noise here and let's just drag this here to my output. Let's launch my scene. Okay, this is tiny. So let's instantly map our resolution here so that we have our template width and height for the scene. Bingo. Okay, so we want to work with custom parameters. Custom parameters are great. This is the best way to create reusable, recyclable components. And if anyone's ever used the scene changer that is in the palette that Jarrett made, it's a pretty nifty system. Basically, what's going on is for every scene in your scene library, it's creating this little data gate here, and TouchDesigner is a pull-based system. This means that if nothing is asking for the thing, it's not going to cook. So as soon as we turn this off, you see that this little cook line is done. Scene Changer is using these gates in order to create an A/B switching system where you're no longer forcing to cook things that don't need to. My Scene Changer is the stock one with a bunch of extra features, and part of that, let's go back to my new noise system. We'll go to Scene Live and Test. Part of that is data gate system, and the idea here is that if you're using external data like MIDI or OSC, or if you wanted some global time-based data, BPM-driven effects, LFOs, this kind of thing, part of the problem is that anything that's always animating is going to cause stuff to cook in your network, even if you're not looking at it, and that can get really expensive. So the idea behind my data gate is that everything ends at this null data here. And when I exit a scene, there is a callback that pushes this data, writes it to this table, and then dat to chop converts it back into chop information and turns this switch back to 0. What this lets us do is stop anything from cooking without breaking all of your references. So you can have animated data in the parent. So let's try this out. I'm going to use some of my contextual shortcuts here. So for instance, if I just roll over a parameter and hit Shift B, this will, in the parent, create page for the parameter and will automatically bind this right here. This is something that is just a couple of clicks that it saves you, but multiplied by 1,000,000 is really nice. So I can go over here and really quickly just grab, some of the important parameters that I might want for this scene. Unfortunately, it does not work with every type of parameter. I'm still trying to figure out if there's a par group thing or if there's something specific to nodes that is doing this, but it's okay. I can use my other hotkeys to pop up my parent customize window. And let's move this over here. I don't like working on one screen. So tuples, it gets a little bit messy with. So I'm going to go over here and we'll just grab this and drop it here. I don't actually want to bind this because I want to gate everything from my null data. So I'm just going to copy this really quickly and we'll do tx, ty, tz. All right, so now we've got a bunch of different things going on in our scene. We don't need to be in here anymore. We've got this noise. Let's mess with it. So we'll go over to the noise page. I don't need to see my presets for right now. One of the cool things that I can do because of Inspector Gadget and because I'm getting my rollover pars here is more contextual hotkeys. So if we look over at the hotkeys pop up, and let's search because we can do that now. If I search for random, we'll see that Shift R will give me a call to my Inspector Gadget, and now I can do some really fun things. I'm going to hit Shift and R here. Let's actually do this really quick. I want presets in this scene. I know this already. Hive is the name of my project, and it's because it is all these tools that work together, and it's probably full of bugs. And also I like this concept of stinging, and stinging is injecting functionality into my system. So if I come here and open up my parents, or I'll just use my hotkey here. Okay, great. I'm going to, whoops, let's do, not in the right thing anymore. Okay, so I want to sting this with presets. So I'm going to give it a preset sting. This is a normal parameter of my scene template. And when I say preset sting, it does a couple of things for me. It drops one of these things in here, and this is meant to be something that you can put into any component. And if we look at the parents here, it just added a debug page and a presets page and bound everything upwards. It made the extensions a part of this parent, so now all of this stuff is attributes of the object. Your presets live locally inside of this thing, so that means you can move it between projects without everything borking you. Presets have always been the thing I've wanted in TouchDesigner. They actually just removed the presets from the palette because of how broken they've been for like years. Darian Brito is a huge inspiration to me, and his TD morph system, which is great, has also been broken now for like a year and a half, and I really just wanted global presets that would work the way I wanted to, with a table-based editing system where I can export my tables and move them between projects and quickly edit and change things. So that's what this is. All right, so we're going to go back up to our UI, and let's actually just go into perform mode here. And all right, so one of the things that Darian has in TD morph is this random button, and I thought that this was really cool. I always wanted it, but I want it all over the place. I want it in any parameter in TouchDesigner. And because I now have contextually aware parameters, I can roll over any parameter and hit Shift R and initiate a tween. We'll get to tweener in a second, but tweener is a component by Valent as a part of his wonderful OLib. I've added a couple of extra methods to it, but it's pretty much stock Valent. One of those methods is a global tween time, and I have that on this knob right here. So let's make this nice and short. Let's make this like a ½ second. And now I can do a quick random thing. Well, let's make sure our scene is cooking. All right, great. So now I can quickly get a bunch of different values here. If I do Alt in R, that's a cut. So that is no longer a tween, that's a 0-second tween. And I can do that on any parameter in TouchDesigner. That's with Alt in R or Shift in R. If I do,
So sorry, that's interpolation between values. Right?
yeah,
Okay.
and it's by default an S-curve interpolation, but you can configure that as well. If I do Shift in D, that will tween me back to the default value stored as the default.
Every value you have to select the value?
It's just a rollover par for now, but we'll show you how we can really expand upon this in a moment. So I can, get a random value for any rollover parameter in my project.
Mouse over.
Yeah, mouse over. And if I do Shift and D, that returns me to the default value. Shift and N will do an interpolation to the minimum value. Shift and X will do an interpolation to the maximum value. If I hold Alt down and hit R, I'll get a random value for everything on the current page that I'm rolled over. Which isn't something you might always want, but it's a really quick way to iterate, and I'll show you some fun ways that we can expand upon that in a moment too. So Shift, Alt, and R, you can get really nice randomization on anything based on a tween time that I can store with MIDI here. Let's check the notes really quick. Tweener, talked a little bit about scene changer. All right, the mapper class. So I also wanted to be able to MIDI map, key map, OSC map to any parameter in TouchDesigner. And as a VJ, I started with node-based stuff back in the Quartz Composer days, which was a really silly program that makes Apple screensavers. And from there, got into VDMX, which is actually still a big inspiration and a really powerful program. Mac only. When I started VJing larger stages and festivals and doing more projection mapping work, I got into Resolume. And so a lot of the things that I'm frustrated with in TouchDesigner are things that I've had for free in other applications for 15 years and are still doable. You can do anything in TouchDesigner. But when people ask me, oh, why do you use Resolume instead of TouchDesigner for this? And it's because Resolume is like renting a furnished condo, and TouchDesigner is like planting some trees in the ground. And sometimes I just need a place to crash for the weekend. I don't have time to build a house from scratch. But I did build a house from scratch, and now I'm starting to live in it. So this is where we're at with Hive right now. So one of the things in Resolume or in Ableton that anyone who's familiar with those softwares might be happy about is there's simple hotkeys for mapping to anything. If I hit Control-Shift-K, you'll see that most of my UI, including straight parameter comps, lights up, and that's the same thing as pressing this button at the top. So key map. Let's say for some reason I want to click on my period here and map that to the letter A. All right, great. I just did that. Control-Alt-K brings up my key mapping table, and we'll see that this was mapped right here. It lives in an editable DAT, which is beautifully presented to me in my table pop-up. And when I press A now, we'll see that we have a keyboard mapping. Great, that's super useful to me. Let's say I don't want it to just be a momentary thing though. Well, we have a toggle button here, so now it just toggles on and off. Let's say I want it to be a momentary, but I want it to be starting at the top. That's cool. Let's say I want to rearrange this between not 0 and 2, but 4 and 7. Great, now we have 4 and 7. So this is all built with more of a push-based system. There's one global table, and I don't really know how well this scales if you had a million different things, but it's not all happening at once. And because of the data gating, if you're mapping to these custom parameters where you're not forcing cooks downstream, I don't think you have to worry about it too much. So this is the same if I hit Control-Shift-M, everything lights up blue for MIDI mapping. Control-Shift-O, everything lights up green for OSC mapping. And it's not just my UI, it's any parameter anywhere in TouchDesigner. Now, what happens if this breaks? Well, let's find out. So if I come in here and I just decided to change the name of this from test to test2. Oh, scheisse. Now when I come in here and press A, oh, nothing happened, and we get this little missing flag. And this missing flag tells me something is wrong over here, and now it'll ignore this thing until I fix it. So it's really easy for me to load up some things, and if my shit is not mapped properly anymore, I can try to figure out what the problem is. Oh, this is named incorrectly, my path is wrong, so let's fix it. We can go back here, and oh, now it's working again, and we have our parameters back. So this was the problem I was trying to solve, is that there's not really great dependable ways to fix your stuff once it breaks. Every preset system, as soon as you rename anything, as soon as you add new parameters to it, now it's broken, and it just is really upsetting and frustrating to me. So the same thing works for MIDI. If I, let's see, go to current scene here. Why is that not contextual? Oh, because this is no longer, there we go. Let's make some presets. So I'm just going to add a preset here. I won't even give it a name. It'll default to preset 0. And okay, let's just quickly randomize all these parameters. We'll do this again. Randomize, I don't like that one. All right, let's do that one. And I actually want this one to be animated. This thing in the middle, I'm calling the data palette. And if anyone is familiar with the really excellent work from Lucas Morgan, he has this thing called GeoPix. And it's an incredible system for pixel mapping LEDs and doing DMX work. And he was gracious enough to release something that he built to solve this same problem that anyone who's ever built UIs in TouchDesigner has, which is that animating parameters is a huge drag. And if you want to visualize them in any reasonable way, it's going to be super resource intensive. So what he's actually done is created something he calls Uber GUI, and that's what's going on here in the center. It looks at a group of custom parameters from any component, and it's actually rendering everything in a web page with a web render, which means it's in its own separate thread from main TouchDesigner, which means you can have dozens and dozens of animated parameters, and it looks nice, and you can customize it, which is wunderbar. So now we have this thing, and I've taken his stock component and I've hacked it a little bit to act more like a normal parameter comp. This means that drag and drop is working again. So I have all of my time-based things over here. Let's say I never use abstime.seconds anymore because I want a global control over that. So I have this nice little global speed knob over here, and that means I can drag this over to my TZ, and I have an abstime.seconds with, you know, mappable controls that I can make go forward or backwards or whatever. And now we can make this another preset that'll store my expressions in it, which is another thing that's really nice because it's really easy to break this stuff. So let's go to test 2 over here. We see all the presets that I just stored. There's a whole bunch of nifty stuff that we can do in here. I'm not going to get to all of it at this time. Oh, interesting. Something is, my button's not working no more. Ah, it's because I recreated that. Constantly finding things that I've broken as of like yesterday. I'm sure William knows what I'm talking about. But this is normally a toggle button. It still works the same way, and it's just showing up as true now, which I don't love.
I also have to look at the time a little bit.
We're at time already? All right, well, I'm gonna, oh shit. Well, we'll deal with that later. All right, so let's see. We're out of time. This is meant to eventually become a completely headless system. One of the things that I've designed is my own little scripting language I call vscript, and this is a way where I can execute things directly from this little fuzzy bar right here. you'll see that this fuzzy bar exists at the bottom here too. I'm on startup actually hacking the UI directly of TouchDesigner and inserting some of my own components in it. This is based off of the TD search palette system that another user has made that's really incredible, which I've also modified in here. But this means that instead of having a million little,
You made an interpreter.
I'm sorry?
Did you make an interpreter? Or what?
It's basically, I have a custom logging system using the Python logging library, and any of my logging calls will exist. When I do a thing here, it'll give me a little printout. So here's a tween, and it'll tell me what I just did. It's also can write this to an external file or to the text port. There's so many more things that I wish I had time to explain to you. One of those is the fact that with this enable button, I can actually turn on and off specific parameters within a preset in order to randomize or do min-max of just those. So each preset is really a premise for performing with. Sometimes I'll have a preset that's only one parameter that's just like opacity. And now, because I have all of my buttons mapped over here, I can interpolate between where I currently am and where I'm at, and my expressions will execute on the end of my interpolations. And like I can literally just ride this random button when I'm performing for ages and ages, and by turning up and down my tween time, get a whole lot of different looks out of that. So like, let's see, just come to here, and I can go to next or previous preset. I can just press this random button for days and days and days and have really cool looks. But this system for the fuzzy execution is the last thing I'll talk about, and then Valand is going to use a hook in order to remove my head. So this is like an eval dat. If live is active, then it's always going. So like if I come in here and start typing, it's red until it actually executes something, and then it turns green. And this is my alternative to having a million little text dats all over the place in order to run scripts. Everything executes from my current network level. So if I say debug me, then it'll tell me the network that I'm currently in. So I can quickly execute things from there. If vscript is enabled, then I can use my shorthand to execute scenes. I can execute presets either by name or by digit. I can execute post effects, which I didn't get a chance to talk to. And my TD Ableton wrapper actually allows me to have all of these flags in Ableton as clips or as markers in the timeline. So timeline sucks in TouchDesigner, so let's just not use it. Let's use Ableton, which is a great timeline. And now when I'm rendering content or making a music video or something like this, I'll just have all of my different tweens and my states. I can decide how long the tween is going to be. I can decide what scene to the next scene I want to go to, and just kind of line up all of those different points directly in Ableton. There's even a secret flag that allows you to execute straight Python from inside of Ableton, which is maybe a dumb thing to do and maybe a dangerous thing to do, but this system is dumb and dangerous. That's all I've got time for. If you want to talk more about it, I'm super happy to nerd about it. If you want to ask more questions about it, DRMBT on Instagram, Patreon, whatever. I'm executing the key macro system, or releasing the key macro system as the first component that should be live either late tonight or early tomorrow morning. But I think there's so much going on in here, and the danger is releasing this huge, big, dumb thing that nobody knows how to use, that doesn't have proper documentation, and then everybody's like, oh, that's neat, I don't understand it, and then everyone forgets about it. So I think I'm just going to release individual modules of this one at a time. There are modules I've been using now for a few years, and I have a couple of users who are using this exact system to perform with audio, visual performances, and it's still an alpha build, I guess, but what project in TouchDesigner isn't? And if you're more interested, talk to me, DM me, shoot me an email, and we'll figure out how to slowly trickle these into the community. If you want to be an alpha tester, let me know, and I'll see what I can do in order to get you set up. Thanks. Questions
I
before?
have a question about like layers.
Yeah, so people have asked me why right now it's only one layer. I made a thing that had multiple layers, but I realized I was never using multiple layers because ultimately this system is meant to be controlled from Ableton or from Resolume. The UI itself is something that you can and should use, but it's only as optimized as TouchDesigner. If I'm in perform mode and it's headless, then I get 60 frames, and I can have multiple layers of this and then just control it from something else. So the idea is, instead of engine comps, instead of having a complicated scene changer that isn't the way myself or the handful of users I currently have are using it, eating up a bunch of extra overhead, it's only one layer for right now. I do have a version of it that has a really hacky n number of layers thing, but most of the way it operates is on the currently playing scene, and so as of now there is no multiple layers. But if you build your scene properly, then you set up a premise where you have everything that you need within that scene.
Presentation, and I would like to take this again as an opportunity to say that we're always happy for new presenters, and please let us know if you have something to talk about, because otherwise we're going to run out of presenters soon, and that shouldn't happen.
Or you have to listen to me again.
Yeah, or we get one of Wieland's Python heavy, why does this not work? Okay, that should be motivation enough. No, sorry, Wieland. Yeah, very happy that Juan is here. It was very spontaneous action, and like I said, we met working on a project together, which we're both very excited about, and which we hope.
Talk a little bit about it. Yeah.
Are you gonna say when it's gonna happen?
Yeah, sure. The invitation, it's
okay. He's gonna say everything about it. So, without further ado, last plugs being plugged. Okay, Juan, thank you very much for coming.
Oh, thank you,
all the way from
Stefan.
Colombia.
Yeah. It's a long trip to be here, and first of all, again, thank you to the No Institute, to Stefan, and all of you to be here. And after such a nice presentations with Josef and Vincent, this is going to be a little bit more soft for all of those who are like new in the TouchDesigner world. I'm not an expert as them. I'm more like an integrator. I use TouchDesigner to integrate technologies. I'm not a programmer. I came from the graphic design and the industrial design field, so I found TouchDesigner like an amazing tool to do all those things that I that I was like thinking that I need to do, but I never found the right tool to do it. From the graphic design and from the industrial design, more from the interaction with users and maybe making prototypes, virtual prototypes or physical prototypes. So yeah, first of all, hola Berlin, or hello, and my name is Juan Barrera, but I'm also known as Videoso. Videoso is my virtual character. I'm mainly focused in the teaching of TouchDesigner, but in the first part of the process. Like I try to introduce the people to the technology, showing them like the capabilities of the system, talking and trying to find more people to get involved in the community, to just have somebody to talk about TouchDesigner, because this is a really hard part of the process. The Videoso, it's a spectacle bear or a villain bar. I don't know how to pronounce it in German. Actually, my video is not playing now, but okay. It's a kind of bird that just lives in the highest mountains in the Andes. It's the only bird that lives in South America, and this is why I choose it like my character. It's a really important being in the environment of Colombia and all Latin America. And I begin from that. I came from Latin America, as you already know, and the first day that I knew TouchDesigner, I just decided to create a Facebook group called TouchDesigner Latino, just to keep all my links together and share it with the people, and in that way they can follow me, the path that I was taking just to learn. There are a few more groups in the Latin America region, but I think this is one of the most active, thinking in the content production mainly. And everything begins like with the first study group in Bogota, like 5 years ago, I think, that it happened in Bogota. And after that, after a few study groups, the pandemic came, and I decided to create a marathon. It was just like 1 month long meetings where we can see all the basic capabilities of the software, where we can know each other, where we can have another topic to think about it. And after that, everything finished with a platform where the people can go and take the courses for free. Everything is like I forgot Creative Commons license. So my main objective is that the people learn how to use this. So this is like a short brief about like my history. Also, together with Carlos, at the same time in the pandemic, we create like this group where we were trying more than learn and more than teaching or learning. It was more about talking about the TouchDesigner capabilities and what all the people, what other people is doing, also in the Spanish region, and everything. It's about networks. Everything's about connections, about people, how it's happening now. So I think TouchDesigner is an amazing tool, but one of the most amazing things about TouchDesigner is the community, is the people, because they are always like thinking in sharing, thinking in presenting these things, like thinking how can they can go further, and yeah. Also now, from the academic part, or from the academic view, I'm working with a UTEC. It's a university in Uruguay. Uruguay is a really small country, like really small country, and this is the public university from Uruguay, and they has an amazing project, and it's a really ambitious project. This is the map of Uruguay, and they have has three main like academic fields. Is like technology, like programming and data. The other one is like eco. I forgot how to say. Sorry. It's like energía, renewable energies, and the third is like food productions from like milk industries or agronomy, and they have the plan to integrate the three fields with TouchDesigner, and they want to integrate all the three different all the how can I say it? I'm sorry. The all of those things that you can see here, like with the logo, are the different institutions all over the country, and they want to integrate all of them by TouchDesigner. So I think it's a really big project, and we are still doing the research to know how to do it, because it's something new, but it's a really big thing also, because and I think it's a correct it's a nice place to do it, because it's really small. They just have like 1,500 students, so now the goal is not that big if you try to do it in another country that is bigger now. So I think that this is one of the most important things about TouchDesigner 2, is that it's a new way to think, you know, because maybe if you try to teach to a whole university how to code, it's going to be harder than if maybe they begin with the flow-based programming paradigm. That is what TouchDesigner is. And now we are in this moment looking for people like all of you, like has a big knowledge about this, and for sure if somebody is interested to be involved in the project, because they are looking for professors, they are looking for people who is interested in the academic field, for sure you are very welcome to join us, and I will give you the contact later if you want to contact me or something. And after that, I want to show you some of my work and how I'm actually working here. This is my first professional work. It was like 5 years ago, and I was working with a company who creates just like pixel mapping. And the project, it was electronic music club, and we create all the lighting system. We control all the lighting system. That is like 14 moving heads, like 120 meters of pixel, smart pixels, 2 strobers, 1 video beam, and the fog machine. This is like the system that we control from one tablet like this using Lemur OSE. And actually, I was still learning, but I did integrate all the technology using like the same tutorials that you are using to learn. So at the end, what I always say, and I was talking for it with a few people, is like the way that I learned to use TouchDesigner was trying to solve problems, not like trying to repeat the tutorials. For me also, I began in that way, but I found out that that was not the right way because I was getting so much information that it was amazing, but I didn't know how to use it. So I decided to begin trying to solving problems, like small problems, and when I understand how to do it, I can continue with the next. No, so maybe for all of them that are still knowing TouchDesigner or that are still like in the most basic steps, maybe that can be a way. Okay, so you can see here, this is the club. It's one of the most important club in Bogota, if it's not the most. And after that, I finished here. That is the format that Stefan was talking at the beginning. It's like a volumetric screen, like a big. I just forgot how to speak English. Sorry. It's like a hologram, but so big hologram, and everything began also in the pandemic. They were trying to do like a showroom for users of TouchDesigner or for people who know a little bit about 3D, and I create this. I integrate this patch where you can get into Twitch and you can decide what is the content that you want to see, and everything changes in real time, and you can see through the camera. And that was the first time that we worked with Stefan. He was one of the artists that collaborated with us, and all of that was happening also in the pandemic, so we tried to do everything online. And I want to show you how the format works. This is the web of the company. The company is called LED Pulse. You can see how it works there in the video. It's a large-scale volumetric screen, and this is the thing that we are going to integrate with the Monom studio here in Berlin. So everything like finally went from pixel mapping in a club to this kind of format in a really natural way. I don't know, the internet is just amazing, and one of the person who took the marathon when I did it in the pandemic knew the guy who invented this format that is also from Colombia, just a coincidence, and we decided to work together, and now I'm here in Berlin giving this speech. It's like crazy. So this format works like a regular wall screen, but instead of 1 pixel, you have like a really long string with so many pixels, and you can join it as models. We can see here in a more detailed way. So,
but do you like render it only in TouchDesigner?
We can render in TouchDesigner when we want to make real-time content, but also you can use the actual file as a regular video. That this is one of the most amazing like change that they did, because if you try to control all of those pixels, every model has 1,000 pixels. If you try to control all of those pixels in the regular way, for example with ArtNet or DMX, you will need like so many universe to do it, and it's gonna be so hard for the computer, it's so expensive. So I will show you how it works, but at the end, yeah, it's imagine just like a LED curtain, but you replicate it in the space, and at the end you get one model that is 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters, and you can make it bigger as you want. So yeah, you can see here, for example, with the human size, for example, now the tallest is 3 meters, but you can go like width and in the deepness however you want. So now I will show you a little bit of the patch. Our main goal was that anybody who knows a little bit about 3D can work with it, even if they never try TouchDesigner. So at the end, the main render engine is this box that you see here, but the only thing that you need to do is to drag and drop 3D animation like this one that is FBX, or if you already know how to work with generative design, you can also program it here in TouchDesigner, or maybe you can work with particles that it came from a noise. At the end, the only thing that you need is to have everything inside a container, and that needs to be a geometry. That's the only thing that you need to know to integrate it. All of this thing is just about the way that it's going to be sent to the Dragon. The name of the device is Dragon, and you just need to change the name here. So for example, I have 3 different content here. One is FBX, the other is audio, and the other is particle. And if I want to change between them, I'm just change the name here in this parameter, and everything is going to select that specific content and put it on the render engine. But also we have another software that is more for like render the actual video, not to create the content in real time. And this works a little bit similar of what Josef was showing us in the beginning. What it creates is just a slicing of the model, but everything goes to the top. I mean, all of these are textures, and when it is sliced, what the brain of the Dragon makes is take the information of every pixel and send it to a specific LED in the Dragon. That's why it's that simple in some way, you know. So for example, here we have this FBX animation running that we can work as usual. We can just, for example, say that it can go, where is it? Like here, that maybe we can say, please be a little bit more slow, for example. And now it's going slow, and in the same way everything is rendering in real time. And we have a little viewer here, so you need to imagine that red box is like the whole box of the Dragon. So if the element, the geometry is inside, this is what it's going to be rendered. So it's pretty simple. So as I told you, you just need to select a 3D file that you have in your computer. You just drop it here in TouchDesigner, and you write here the name. So it's so easy. And yeah, like we are now like developing things to make the Dragon more interactive, like trying to give senses, trying to use visual computing with Kinect, trying to bring the also kind of a skin using lidars, for example. But yeah, I mean, we are now in the step to integrate it with a spatial environment like the Monom sound system. For all of those who don't know what is the Monom, they have this amazing warehouse in the Funkhaus here in Berlin, and it's a system that it's 16 columns. It's an array of 4 rows by 4 columns or something like this, and every column it has 3 levels of sound, and under that grid there are 9 subwoofers, so they can position the sound in the space. So it's like the same thing that we do with the LEDs, but in this case is with the sound. And this is what we are working with Stefan in this moment. And for sure, we hope that all of you have the opportunity to go and see how it works, and also to get involved in the workshops if you want to understand a little bit deeper how it's working the system. Okay.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
What audio 3D audio is it? Is it wave field synthesis or?
Sorry, can you repeat?
What technology is for the audio?
Actually, I'm not really into the audio part because this is from the Monum side, but
For the sound, it's like their own custom thing. I don't know if it's wave field synthesis.
It's ambisonics, maybe?
I think it's their own thing.
yeah, they develop their own
But
system.
Not actually in space, it's just in the next pillar or padding between pillars.
I think, yeah, it should work like this.
Yeah, something.
Very similar to wavefield, but you can do upgrade sounds.
Yeah. But you don't hear it like right next to you, only if the pillar is right next to you.
Yeah, it's like
You still do.
You can hear sound which would be like 50 meters under you, and then coming slowly, and then going 50 meters above you.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think that, I mean, I'm also not an expert, but I found the localization was pretty, I mean, the best that I've ever heard.
Yeah.
You can really, okay, so if you get where it's going there, it's going fully above, you know, so.
Cool.
Yeah, so for example, here this is going to be installed in the middle. Let's see if we can find another better picture. Okay, you can see there all the columns. So we have like 9 spaces, and we are going to install 16 models in the middle that it's like 2 meters width and 2 meters large by 3 meters tall. And in between every 4 columns there are going to be 1 single model, so it's going to work like a column, and in that way we are going to fill all the space with light. And yeah, this is like the information for the festival. The name of the festival is a Spatial Fest. It's going to be from the 25th to the 27th of November in 1 month. And yeah, you are all invited to be there and to know how the Dragon and how the Mono system works. And also, if somebody wants to know more about the project that I just told you with the Uruguay University, or you want to know my work, or maybe you want to chat or something, this is my Instagram is videoso. The I and the last O, this is a 0 actually, and this is a 1, no? But but you cannot tell so much. So it's like UB1DEOS0. And yeah, this is pretty much all. Gracias, danke, and I'm sorry for my English. So if you have any question or something that you want to know, just say it, please.
Are you using like a series of cameras with
Yeah, exactly.
near and far in order to render?
Exactly, this is the thing. It's just a different deepness of the camera, so in that way you can get the layer. It's pretty simple but so powerful.
Will that fill in a 3D model? Like it'll
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on the way that it's modeled. Yeah, but it can fill the model, or you just can have like the shell.
Can you choose to fill the model if it isn't filled, or does the model need to be built to have the?
You can change the deepness of the the deepness of the skin. So in that way you can begin like filling the space from out to the inside. Yeah.
So volumetric, or like transparency, is not possible only skin and inside, or can you also define inside?
Yeah, I mean, if you, for example, has the skin of that Greek that it was moving, but you put brain inside, you can see the brain and you can see also the skin.
I mean, you have to build a 3D model. You have to make a build 3D model. It's not going to auto-fill, right?
That was the same thing that Vincent was asking. Yeah, like if you, I think that I respond the wrong question. Yeah.
Yeah, roughly. Actually, what I meant was like with transparent, like what Josef was showing with volumetric brainwashing kind of things. You don't have like solid objects inside of objects, but yeah, with transparency.
Yeah, it's going to be
Like,
transparent. Yeah,
You can do it, yeah.
yeah.
I have a question. So does it actually like read like vertices and the like vertex points? Like meaning, for example, the thing the GLSL stuff, the volumetric. So would it read this if you put it in this box?
No, everything is about the camera.
So it must be a geo, right?
Yeah, it must be a geo. Yeah, everything's about the camera. So you have different cameras with a different deepness. So one is going to go just the first, slice it, and after exactly.
Because from the patch you showed, it looked like it's creating a 3D texture from it, right?
Let's check. Yeah.
Create a texture 3D.
A texture 3D, yeah. So probably you could as well just pipe in whatever 3D texture you have. For example, like I think it might be interesting to use a 3D texture from my patch and calculate shadows and then pipe it in.
Exactly. That was the same thing that I thought when you showed that, because this is like the basic way to do it, but if we can run in your way, it's going to be completely better. Yeah.
We have a question from the chat.
Yep.
I also found exciting is that once you got it like that, like the video, it took me a while to process it.
Yeah.
But once you've got it like that in pops, then you can just start touching, overlaying.
Yeah. This is the most amazing thing, because you can just record it as a video and you can edit it, or you can put it in Resolume and you can make multiplication, all of that as you did with regular video. So even if you can connect your phone to a HDMI cable and you have the video there in the phone, you just click play and this is going to feed the dragon because it's regular video.
Okay, we have a question from chat. You mentioned that you want to implement a LiDAR scanner in the future project. Mara is curious to know why they want to use it. What kind of interactions will it be used for?
Okay, the LiDAR can give us the interaction. Yeah, I mean, the LiDAR creates like a kind of a skin or a wall. So in that way, maybe if somebody try to touch the dragon, we can recognize where it was touched or not, or how far it was, and in that way we can make like the reaction based on that position in the skin or in the limits of the box, for example.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
What's the biggest amount of pixels you can control?
It depends on I mean, I think that we haven't get to the maximum yet, because if you, I mean, let's see, this one is just 1280 and 960 and is less than a half filled. So with this size we can control, in this case, are 12,000 in this, just with this size of videos. But if you need more, it's just about to the resolution of the video, so you can control so many.
So addressing is not a problem.
No, there is not a problem. That's why it's that amazing. Yeah, because it doesn't matter how many you put together. It's just about the resolution of the video that you are working on.
So for this festival, you
There are gonna be 24 modules, so this is like 24,000 LEDs. Yeah. Yep. Also, if somebody is interested to know the format, like in a deeper way, or wanna try the dragon, just text us to Instagram or to the website, and we are really open to work with artists, or maybe you have some idea. We are always looking for new talent that can push the format, because it's a really new format. It's something that you cannot buy. We just work with like big companies that can afford the rent of this kind of device, and now we are here working in a specific in an artist project that it's something new for us too, and in an amazing place like the Monum. So yeah, just go and know.
How long are you here?
I will be here for 1 month. Yeah, I'm gonna travel. I'm going to Moscow to train a new partner, but I'm going back in the 13th. So if somebody wants to meet, also I will be here.
And how long will it be at Monum?
The festival is at the end of the next month, but we want to keep the dragon installed there for at least half year. Yeah, because we wanna make like a laboratory there inside.
Cool.
Yep.
Thanks.
No, thanks you, all of you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much all for coming, and thank you for this great presentation.
Thank you.
As always, we're gonna, we can have like a few drinks, but at some point we're gonna have to close the studio. And for everybody who wants, we have a table reserved at the Omega Bar, just 20 meters down this road on the other street side, where we can continue to have drinks and conversations. And thank you for being here. And I can only repeat myself, if you ever want to present something, be it small, be it big, please get in contact with me, with Wieland, with Marta, with Helene, with everybody from here. We're all happy to host you at some point. Thank you.